Hey everybody, today we're going to be taking a look at a MetaNite deck from the RS to PK format. Now, before I get into the video and I start talking about the deck, when I first started playing RS to PK, I think Jason invited me a couple of months ago, probably about 4 months ago now. The format was so relatively unexplored, and every single week people were coming up with different decks and different ideas, and it was really fresh. And as a player, that was something that really appealed to me, and I really enjoyed that, not only as a player but as a deck builder. However, when you basically take every major player from the 2004 to 2012 era and put them in weekly tournaments together, metas get flushed out really quickly. And I feel like to a certain extent, that's what happened with RS to PK. When I go and play in these tournaments now each week, or I try to hit at least one a week, it goes from what's an awesome deck that I can create. And I'm going to say I still think there is a lot of room for innovation in this format. But it's kind of switched a little bit to what deck is going to be a good play for the meta that I'm expecting. And once again, when you're doing these tournaments, 16-player tournaments, you know what kind of players you're playing against. It's a lot easier to make meta calls than if you were doing a very large, we'll say like a 200-person RS to PK tournament. And to kind of relate this back to the video, when I'm going into these tournaments now, I go from, is there this really cool, unique deck I can build and take everybody by surprise? And now I'm at, what deck can I build, or what deck do I want to play, and how do I tech it for the meta? And to take it back to the video and take it back to the deck we're covering today, MetaNite, the deck we're going to look at I have it built for my current list, but I very easily could switch probably 4 to 6 cards in this, just depending on what I was expecting. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the video. I just want to be upfront and say that just understand that MetaNite has a lot of room to tech. It has a lot of room to kind of play things a little bit differently here and there, just kind of depending on the meta you're expecting. Especially like a deck with MetaNite, which has, to be honest, it's a very strong deck, but it also has some very strong counters in the format that you need to be ready for. So, starting off here, we play 3 Holin's Castform, 1 Jirachi. I've come to really like this in a lot of the RS PK decks. I find that the 1 Jirachi is extremely useful, especially if I'm playing from behind. Holin's Castform is great when you go first and you open with it and you have an energy drop. Jirachi is a lot stronger if you're going second and you don't have an easy way to get Holin's Castform into the active spot, or if you have to retreat your active. So, like, let's say, for example, we open with Dratini, and then we hold on Mentor. We could grab, Castform, Beldum, whatever, but unless we have a switching card, we can't just instantly put that Castform in the active spot and attach the energy. So the soonest we'd be able to Delta Draw is going to be turn 3. But instead, we can grab Jirachi, and then we can be Wishing Starring that turn to set up. Drawing massive cards with Delta Draw is usually slightly better, but that's not always going to be the situation we're in, and then having that ability to go Wishing Star is great too. I also want to say that we do run Metal Energy in the deck. We also obviously run Castform, so we are able to actually use Metallic Blow, which can be a very surprisingly useful attack in certain decks, against certain decks in certain situations. I was playing against Jason one time, not with this deck, but with a different deck, and he was playing Rayquaza Delta, and Jirachi actually came in huge, being able to hit those Rayquazas for 50. It was a big enough threat that he has to deal with the Jirachi, but it's kind of a throwaway card from my side of the board. So, just a couple things on that. Now, for the concept of the deck is that we are going to use Metagross's Crush and Burn, which is going to do 30 damage plus 20 more damage for each energy we discard in play. So basically, we're going to use Crush and Burn to do a ton of damage, and then we're going to use some different support Pokemon to put energy into play, so we're constantly able to get free energy drops and then discard all those energy to do massive amounts of damage. Now, Metagross also has a power called Delta Control, which lets us look at 4 cards. One of them go into our hand, the other 3 go on the bottom of our deck in any order we choose. This is obviously very strong for consistency, especially if we have more than one in play. If we have, let's say, 2 Delta Metagrosses in play, we can be looking at the top 8 cards of our deck. It's very, very easy to find not only cards we need, but to make sure we're not dead drawing, we're finding supporters, things like that. So we play 4 Beldum. The Free Retreat Beldum is obviously by far the best Beldum. That way you can if you open with Beldum and you have Transceiver Mentor, you can basically get another Beldum and then free retreat into whatever you want. 2 copies of Metatang. We went with a Delta Metatang. It works out really well with Delta Drop. And then we went 3 copies of Delta Metagross and then 1 copy of Metagross from Deoxys. A couple different things on this. One, it's a Psychic Pokemon, Psychic Attacker. Can be useful in certain situations, but it also lets us get a Metal Energy out of our discard pile and attach to our active Pokemon in exchange for just a single damage counter. Not only is this another form of energy acceleration, but it's also a form of energy acceleration that comes off of the Metagross line. So it's not like we have to set anything separate up for it. I play a very thin 2/1/2 Dratini. Now, this might seem unusual, but as I've tested this, I have had 0 issues just playing a 2/1/2 Dragonite line. I have never really needed or wanted a thicker line. I would not scoff at a deck if somebody wanted to play a 3/2/3 or a 3/1/3. It's just this deck, there's only so many spaces to go around, and there's a lot of different things I wanted to do. So I stuck with a 2/1/2 line. It does get a little bit awkward if we prize, let's say, a Dratini or a Dragonite, but ideally we're going to be able to dig through our prizes fast enough to be able to find it. Now, I play a 101 Sceptile line, and this will come in and out of the deck completely based on what I think the meta is going to be for that week. If I'm expecting a lot of speed spread, it's got to stick it in there. If you're expecting a lot of even turn 2 decks, it's great against decks like Benetti X. It's great against even Arcanine EX is probably going to be a loss regardless, but just against those big, fast EX decks, it really helps out just to add that extra attack and that extra colorless energy for them to attack, and it also shuts off any other powers. So this comes in and out completely dependent on the meta. I've always liked Sceptile EX, but I find it very hard to set up in a lot of decks. Thanks to Delta Control, it's pretty easy to get this card out consistently. I play 1 copy of Lugia EX. This is essentially because it's really nice to have something you can just answer a big EX with. And it's also very nice for a couple of weeks. Dark Steelix was getting very popular, and Lugia EX was just a very simple, easy answer you could throw up there and knock out a Dark Steelix. 1 Holen's Voltorb. I have played around with this, if it's worth doing this or another Lightning Energy. I have liked the Voltorb enough to keep it in the deck, especially with our bumped up Mentor line. It's just nice to have that searchable energy. 4 Holen Transceiver, 3 Holen Mentor. We do play the bumped up line. It is so essential in this deck that you just get a good opening that you do want that extra copy of Mentor in there. Also, in the later stages of the game, you are going to want to be able to search out your Holen's Castform, your Holen's Voltorb, just to have easy access to those cards. I play 1 copy of Holen Adventurer, 1 Holen Scientist. Those are going to be pretty standard counts there. And then I stuck with only a single copy of Holen Researcher. This is something that I could see being bumped up pretty easily. If I was going to, let's say, drop the Sceptile line, I could see playing a second Researcher. The 1 copy is played fine for me. As long as you hit that first Delta Control Metagross, you are just going to be golden. You're going to be fine. I've also gone back and forth on playing Steven's Advice. While Delta Control is very strong, it only gives you access to a single card. So having mass draw cards like Steven's Advice that might net you 4, 5, 6 cards would be really nice to have. 4 copies of Rocket's Admin. I consider this a near staple in this format. I think about every single deck should be playing 4 copies of Rocket's Admin. I don't see a whole lot of reason not to. 4 copies of Windstorm. Literally every single thing in this format hurts you. Curse Stone hurts you. Battle Frontier hurts you. Ironically enough, Desert Ruins even hurts you if you have Lugia out or Sceptile. Cessation Crystal really hurts you. So I go with 4 copies of Windstorm. I also wouldn't hate playing a fifth out, quote unquote. If I was dropping the Sceptile line, I might be okay playing a Desert Ruins, just because that can change the math with Crush and Burn. Crush and Burn on Metagross, it might make a knockout a little bit easier, maybe force you to discard 1 less energy. I also think Hole in Ruins would be solid, just to have a little extra draw in the deck, be able to discard, get energy into the discard pile for Dragonite or Metagross. 4 Windstorm played fine for me, though. 4 copies of Rare Candy. This is pretty essential, playing 3 Stage 2 lines. ATM Rock is not very popular in this format. If ATM Rock all of a sudden became very popular, I'd probably have to think a little bit more carefully on some of this, just because we do leave ourselves, just playing the deck, you do leave yourself very vulnerable to an ATM Rock. But currently, I don't think MetaNite's popular enough to really justify playing high ATM Rock count, and I don't think other decks in the format are really bothered by ATM Rock, so I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. Now, for my switching cards, I went ahead and played 2 copies of Warp Point. This is kind of a nod to how strong Cessation Crystal is, and this gives us a pseudo out to it where we're able to put it back to the bench and ideally have that 1 turn of powers, where with Delta Control, ideally we're going to be able to find our Windstorm. Now, Warp Point, in my opinion, is probably the weakest option out of the 3 between Switch and Fluffy Berry. This is a lot of personal choice, personal preference, and almost completely based on what you feel the meta is going to be. I also can see bumping this up to a 3 count on your switching cards. I would totally think it'd be a good idea to play like I said, a 3rd copy, like a Switch, a 3rd Fluffy Berry, whatever you want to do. 2 is played fine for me, though. 2 copies of Pokemon Retriever. This is pretty much essential to the deck. You play so many different lines, stuff is going to get knocked out, especially when your main consistency Pokemon is also your main attacker. Also, you're going to want to sometimes pitch stuff with Hole in Adventure that you can't really afford to discard just because you're in a bad spot. You want to get that extra draw off, like a Dragonite or a Sceptile or something. But 2 copies of Pokemon Retriever are absolutely essential. And then I played 7 Lightning Energy, 4 Metal Energy. 7 Lightning seems a little low, but it's played really well for me. I've had absolutely no issues with it. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up the deck profile. I have played around. I've not played this deck in one of the weekly Sunday tournaments yet, but I have tested this quite a lot. I am really liking it. There's so many weaknesses in the format. Just basically, like I said, any counter stadium hurts you. There's a lot of matchups that are rough for you. Decks like Shiftry can be very difficult for you. Rags is a winnable matchup, but it can be a very hard matchup. It's just, MetaNite's going to just be a meta call. When you think it's going to be a good meta to play MetaNite in, hit a little joke there, then it's a good deck to play. But if you're expecting a lot of, like I said, Shiftry or Rags or stuff like that, it's probably not a good call for the format. I also want to note I opted not to play a star Pokemon in the deck. I think Dragonite or Rayquaza Star is just too hard to pull off, and then the Latios Star, I just don't feel like it does enough in the current meta to really justify it. I think it's dead against a lot of different decks. Lugia was just the best option. I could even see playing a 2nd copy of Lugia, especially if I dropped the Sceptile line. I could see playing a 2nd copy of Lugia, just being able to send up a Lugia and instantly take a knockout on a large Pokemon EX is just so easy to set up and so useful. If I was going to do that, though, I would probably switch my Warp Points to, let's say, probably Switches. And obviously, I'd have to drop the Sceptile line. The Sceptile can affect the Lugia because of the extra liquid Pokebody, but as long as you're careful and you're thinking about what you're doing, this should be fine. Or it plays fine. And then the 1 copy of Lugia, to be honest with you, plays fine too. It's very easy to search off of Pokemon Retriever with, and then playing those 2 copy of Pokemon Retriever, always get it back. But that's just some stuff that I've been testing and thinking about and kind of coming in and out of the deck depending on the meta I'm expecting. So, alright, that goes ahead and wraps up the video. I hope you found the video informative, and once again, if you like content like this and you want to see more content like this in the future, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps me out a lot. And if there's any decks you want to see me profile, definitely drop a comment down below. And I've got a lot of different decks that I'd like to cover, and I'm kind of doing them at my own pace on some things, but if people have a real interest in seeing one deck or one matchup in particular, I'll definitely make sure that I'm taking the time to cover that. Until then, I hope to see you in the next video.